So next up, we're going to kick off a fireside chat with no fire. They wouldn't allow that. So we're going to start, we're going to bring a couple of you back on the stage. First, I'm going to start with Kim, if Kim could join me back on the stage for Perficient. So Kim, thank you for joining us for this session. Let's grab a seat. Mr. Ray Wang. Mr. Ray, come on now, join us. Thank you again. And I'd like to also introduce a very special guest, and we're very appreciative of him doing this with us as well, Mr. Bernardo Bazut. He's joining us as Director of E-Commerce and Omnichannel for Capel, one of the largest retailers in all of Mexico. And so, Bernardo, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. All right, we get started? All right, let's go. Usually it's Ray asking the question, so that's what throws me. So this should be fun. All right, I'll start with question one. So Omnichannel, it's been talked about forever. It goes way, way back. Geez, I remember when REI did online pickup in store back in the early 2000s? Don't even remember. But what's changed today, let alone forget about maybe just COVID, which we know, but what has changed relevant to what customers expect of what Omnichannel actually means today? So I'll open it up for whoever would like to kick us off on that. Perhaps Bernardo, because I think you are the director of Omnichannel, so.
Really? I thought this was like a trivia panel. Or
Trivia,
really?
yeah.
Okay, let's start with it. What's changed so far, I think customers are constantly evolving among channels, and I think the biggest shift post-COVID is they're moving backwards or towards the traditional offline channels to the physical presence. And if you're not having a consistent experience among off and online channels, then your customers are going to struggle and your business will be struggling for sure. Technology and platform-wise, if it's not seamlessly integrated and you don't have a real seamless customer experience, customers will definitely continue to suffer, and customers are not really willing to wait for you to catch up. There are thousands of options out there, many companies doing a great job, and I believe that's a big shift, especially post-COVID. A lot of companies did a great job, and customers are not willing to wait for you to catch up. Legacy systems connecting to the front-end systems, both digital and on the physical space, have to be revamped and updated and have to scale and be up to speed and be really capable of doing so. Marketing technology as well, MarTech it's really hard. It's really hard time. I mean, getting to understand how marketing, consumer marketing trends, and especially getting into paid SEO, SEM, and going backwards into traditional ATL media is really a continuous shift. It's getting very expensive to acquire customers or to retain or to make them come back to our digital channels. So you gotta be careful on your profitability measurements as well. So again, customer lifetime value is really always the metric to look after. So that's my take so far.
Yeah, I'll build on what Bernardo is saying. Customers don't care what department you're in and what channel you happen to be connecting to. They really don't care. You do, though, and that's really what it is. We have to invert that process. I don't use the word omnichannel as much these days because I think of these as immersive experiences. I know omnichannel is very, very important, but we're not selling products anymore, right? At the end of the day, we're going to end up selling outcomes, right? And those really have no boundaries, and I think that drives a lot of this. Back to the point you're talking about, which is really important, customer acquisition costs become really important in your equation. You have only so much capital you can allocate towards a marketing campaign, and so the more you can drive down your customer acquisition costs, the more you can improve existing customers and land and expand with your existing customers, the better off you're going to be. And I think that's what we're going to learn more and more, why that's an important piece. And what omnichannel does in that context is back to your 7, right? That's really important, right? Those 7 touch points are going to happen not in the places you want them to. And that's the hardest part. So.
I would build off that to say that they're not going to happen where you want them to, and the customers expect control. And I think that's the biggest change I've seen from the customer expectation perspective in the past few years is now it's not even a question of can I, it's like, why can't I? And if I can't, I'm gone. And that extends to everything from where I shop to where I return to how I manage my, I call it fulfillment, but how I get my stuff, when I get my stuff. and we always talk about customer expectations are growing, but I think they've just exploded and they've become very impatient and not willing to stick around and let you fix the problems.
And adding up to what you mentioned, customer expectations and customers want to be in control. When your customers become digital savvy, they become extremely intolerant and very fast.
That's the right
think
word.
about yourselves. When you're buying online, returning to a store, you're not willing to spend 15 minutes in line for someone to tell you, guess what, I cannot take this, you have to go online again and print the label because we're not able to do so here. So as soon as they become digital savvy, they're going to become a pain in the ass for your company if you don't get smart enough in doing so. So
Technical
be careful
terms.
on that. Sorry, that's my Spanglish.
Spanglish.
That translates, right?
Spanglish.
So be careful with that and be prepared for that. Customers, they're not willing to be in control. They are in control. Really, they're in control. And they're willing to walk away and click in a different website or go to a different store and make a purchase. I mean, we're not unique anymore. And there's also crazy companies willing to sell under cost to acquire customers. I don't know if they're going to continue in business for many more years, but they're willing to do so. So watch out for that as well.
Well, that leads me to another question. So when you think about, we talk about real-time journeys and supporting that customer journey across any of these moments of truth, these moments of time. How do companies, and you don't have to get specifically to yours obviously, but generally, how are companies needing to prioritize how to decide where to start and what to do? We all say, well, you need to do journey maps. Well, we've been doing journey maps forever. What's the most important thing that people have to do to start, to be able to enable this and activate customers across these journeys, across this omnichannel experience? Wide open question.
Well, I talked about my methodology earlier.
You did.
But I can't emphasize enough, I still think a lot of companies struggle to get direct customer input. Still, I think the perception is research is costly and time consuming, and there are a lot of tools out there to automate and collect some of this feedback asynchronously, but nothing beats getting out in the field and talking to customers. And in the field could be a phone call, it could be a survey, but that's really where I would start, especially now, is understanding what your customers want, how your operations are supporting that, and then figuring out what to do with the technology and the data to meet those needs. It sounds such like a basic answer, but every day we're working with clients saying, well, where's your customer research? Well, we don't do it. So,
Starts with that.
I mean, start with whatever analytics tool you have in place. Start there. You have a lot of data. There's too much data to be consumed and analyzed and understood. So start with any analytics tool you're using and start just where the money is. I mean, where the money is, where's the last step of the process or the first step of the process when you're losing customers, and start there from the biggest opportunities and listen to the data. Don't try to interpret that because my experience or in my past job or based on this company's history. Start with data, listen to the data, and be wise enough to make decisions based on data and take the risk to fail fast. Data-driven all the time, but start with whatever data you have on your analytics tools that you have in place.
Can I jump on that? That's such a great answer. We recently, we have a podcast. Everyone has a podcast, so it's nothing special. But we just interviewed Neil Hoyne, from Google, Chief Data Officer, and that was the point he made. You have enough data. Don't think you need more data. You have enough. Look at what you have and follow the money. And I thought that was such a pragmatic piece of advice, because data, everyone's overwhelmed with it. That was his point. You have enough to do something, so go do something with it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the expectations and where customers are. So we spent a lot of time studying, what people fill out in the response for surveys, right? What they fill out versus what they actually do versus what we want them to do are three different things. And I think it's really important to map where you want that journey to go, because they may say something and that's really not what they meant to be. And if you just follow what they basically survey back to you, you could fail big time. And that's what happens to a lot of folks, right? You should always have a version of your vision of where you want them to go, right? And study that versus the behavior of what they actually did. And I think that will give you the complete picture. And it does come back to the data, right? And so the more that data is being collected in the background, right, that's the context that we want to get. And so if you want to deliver mass personalization at scale, you have to have context, right? So time or date or weather or sentiment or just enough context. You don't need a lot to do it. And you also need to give choices, because what we want with choices is, in the digital world, what's beautiful is every choice is a feedback loop. It's an A/B test. Right? You have attribution in all these different places that you want to take advantage. And so you don't need a lot of data to get started, but you also want to be able to automatically collect that data to get to those patterns that you want to see. And then the last piece is, you're going to do anticipation, and you're not going to have enough data. Right? So you're going to have to trust your gut and run that A/B test to say, I think they're going to head in this direction. Let's test, let's see what actually happens, and then bring that back as a feedback loop. Now, that was very manual. Now you got to do that in an automated way so that you can do that like 10x without ever having to think of it. And that's where the data-driven piece is going to be as you think about that mass personalization at scale.
That makes a lot of sense. That opens up to really my next question. Can we talk about some use cases around how data has been applied to transform this journey? Just specific examples or things that come to mind that you've seen in the market that have really made a difference at scale.
I'll start with search. We've got a lot of data, and we spend maybe too much time trying to fix and see if the tool was the right tool that we had or not, without listening to that data. So when we actually realized and start digging into that data, we found out that we were making too many rules based out of gut and very few rules based out of what the data outcome gave us. And we started creating some automated rules, some business-driven rules. And as soon as we migrated into a new search tool, some of those business rules were not making any logic anymore. So then we turned out into what the search tool gave us as AI, and it started helping us out. But basically, as soon as we started, we saw a huge increase in conversion. We've seen that so far. Not at the level we've expected, but data has shown us specifically, if you listen to the data and you make those assumptions and you think that you have the gut feeling correct and you make the decision, eventually you'll find out if it's working or not. And if it's not working, make an adjustment. But continue, keep up. So we've seen a huge increase there on search. On the checkout process, we're having a lot of issues with inventory. We have 23 warehouses throughout Mexico. We have those inventories allocated in several regions. It's not a single view of the inventory. So as soon as we got into the data analysis, why are we losing so many customers at the last part of the process? It was basically because we weren't showing all the inventory available to our customers. And we've made an analysis of how much money we're losing there, and then we're going back to the planning and commercial analysis team to show them with data how much money we're losing because the business rules that we set up and decided that that was the best way of the company not to overspend or over-allocate inventory, but that was business gut and not data-driven. So those are two examples where we're actually still working on them.
Yeah, no, we've got interesting data like from different clients on friction, right? So we're all talking about frictionless. It's great. It's going to be automated. It's going to be easy. Yeah, you know how much money you lose when you have that little friction? Because friction is where you actually insert yourself for an engagement, or you insert yourself for an upsell, or for a cross-sell, or for a conversion, or for feedback. And so one of my good friends, Soon Yu, is basically talking about where you actually need to think about friction as part of your overall life cycle. So there's data coming back that says when things are so simple, like, hey, you lose all this information, there's no connection points. It's just like automated payroll. Like if you do automated payroll, you're like, no idea, oh, it's something in my check. But if you actually get the payroll slip, That in itself is something of a way of communicating to an employee. If you get your bank statement, that's the way, or an account statement of communicating an offer. And when those things are so automated, you don't even see them, you lost that one touch point. So that's one of those in that way. The second one is pricing, and there's some interesting pricing data, right? So if you're perceived, and here's what's really going on in the marketplace, you're either high-end, massive margin, or you're low-end commodity and high volume, right? The market has bifurcated in that way, and all the data shows us that. So if you're not charging enough, people are like, oh, whatever, what is that, right? Right? Or if you want to go for volume, value, and that's your game, then go for it and play it up. But that goes back to the thing we talked about earlier. Your brand and your pricing, that data is actually starting to pop up as well.
Data is tough. I mean, I can think of 1,000 use cases, and of those 1,000 use cases, I still absorb the pain of all of our clients who are working with their data and trying to figure out, what do I have, what does it mean, and yet I still can't find my customer's birthday. I mean, it's stuff like that. But a lot of use cases that we're focusing on now are really chasing after that one-to-one personalization panacea. How do we get there? How do we really surface relevant, meaningful offers, communications, troubleshooting to you? And we have a lot of clients who are making good headway there. I think, if I'm being honest, I'm surprised how much headway we've made during the pandemic, only because I think there's a lot more data that we were able to gather and start sifting through, and now we have the tools to do a lot more with that. But I'm curious, Gary, as you asked that question, I remember you talking about earlier this morning using data to help transform a company that markets to, what do you say, 1/3 of the globe? So I think you must have a use case to share.
There is a little bit of one. That's a good point. I alluded to it earlier. You probably have their device in your pocket. They have service lines, and I have to be careful how I get into this, but basically the premise they had years ago, and we worked with them on this transformation, they weren't using data. You would think this company would be using data, but they're very strict about privacy. That's good. That's very good. But when you think about personalization and everything we're talking about, companies that master the privacy and ensure customer integrity around that can win the day, and I think this company did that. What they used to do was only about 5 to 6 campaigns a year. They would align around their product launches. They didn't think to really market the services that go with the device, that come with it. And I think you can probably guess what some of those services are. So when you think about it, they were doing 5 to 6 campaigns a year and said we need to transform it. What did they do? They looked at their data. They said we want to go to some basic real-time journeys. And from that, they started putting in recommendations and basic email marketing, all cohort-based, that said, if you like this music and you liked what this song was, odds are you probably like this genre. And they would feed you down a certain path, but all cohort-based, none of it one-to-one, none of it that way at all. And the real transformation for them was, it turned out by doing that, we helped them grow from 1.25 billion people in their database to 2.5 billion. And that was 275 campaigns a day they're now running across 8 different shared service lines. And they're all using data in different ways. One particular service line says, I have a very tiny AI team, I don't need to put any automation in, but if you're dealing with music, you've got some pretty sophisticated stuff in there. And you've got to be able to work across that spectrum. What is that? That yielded about $2 billion incremental revenue per year. So just by handing that and doing, it also grew their conversion rate from 2% to 20%.
Yeah.
I mean,
they have a 20% conversion rate, that little fruit orchard that in my hometown of Cupertino, but keep going.
I think that's, I'm not sure.
I'm from Cupertino, but yeah. We have some fruit orchards. So.
Fruit orchards. Yeah. The whole valley used to be a fruit orchard.
Whole valley was a fruit orchard, yes. I had to be more specific, but yeah.
No, I appreciate it, yeah. So show of hands along those lines, how many are trying to tackle this with a CDP? CDPs, anybody? Going once, going twice. Customer data platforms.
In the green.
I got one. Okay, I won't point out who it is. But everyone's heard of the CDP thing going on right now, right? I mean, that's the big trend. That's how we're trying to, everybody's saying they can solve this problem. So I'm curious your view. So does it really solve the problem? What does solve the problem? Do you need a $100 million, $10 million project to solve this problem in reality?
Well, it started with a data mart, then that became a data warehouse, and then it became master data, then it just broke off into like a whole bunch of data everywhere, and then we tried to pull it all back together with integration, and now we're back to the CDP. So I don't think the problem is the data, I think the problem is us.
Fully agree.
Applause for that. Come on, let's go.
Fully agree.
Applause for that.
Can you repeat it so I can record you, please?
I think it was. I mean, but here's the thing: is like, well, okay, let's go the other way around. What business questions do you want to ask, right? You had vanity metrics like 10 million likes, like, and what did you do with it, right? So vanity metrics are things that have no action or financial numbers to the back end. 10 million likes that converted to 1,000 sales per store, perfect. 10 million likes that led to a 5% increase in lift. Perfect, right? So it's the business questions we're trying to ask. So there's this old Coveyism, if you remember Stephen Covey, Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. Find the business questions you want to ask. Go into every department and say, what are the 5 questions, 10 questions you needed to ask and answer? Odds are you can only answer 2 or 3 out of them. If you're trying to answer everything else, let's go find where the answer is. Let's go find the business process behind that. So which flow is it? Is it campaign to lead? Is it an order to cash? Is it a procure to pay on the back end? And how do we actually then go back and figure out all the data points that connect to it? And then you can map out what you need in a CDP or data mart or anything else, right? And that's the way we try to help clients think about how to solve that problem. And then, yes, then the CDP makes sense, right? So, or any other tool you want to use along the way as you tie it back to journeys and automation and processes. And that's where you get the most bang for the buck.
I would, as you were talking, I was thinking about I'll call it a therapy session between like a CEO and the head of analytics, and it was the same, conversation. The CEO is asking a very basic question, why did I beat my comp yesterday? Tell me why. And the head of analytics was saying, well, I sent you the dashboard. And she was like, well, but why did I beat my comp? And he's saying, well, I sent you the dashboard. I'm like, we could do this all day, guys, but what are we really doing here? And to me, yes, it's not about the technology. It never is. It's about the people and process. And very quickly, we uncovered, you could call it storytelling, you could call it analysis, you could call it insights, but they were missing a critical skill set of, yes, you can answer the business or ask the business questions, but you have the right people to answer the question. It's not just building the dashboard and sending it over. And more we're seeing with the explosion of data and with all these technologies, it just becomes, we're missing that person intervention to kind of interpret and answer those questions. So yeah, that's it's painful.
Let me share with you my 10 years of history within the organization. When I joined the company and I asked them for our customer segments, they told me we have 10, and they're based out of the punctuality in which they pay back their private label card. So I told them, yeah, that's one way of being our customer. Good. What are we doing with that? Well, whenever they delay, we reach out to them to tell them that they need to pay us back. And from a marketing standpoint, well, if they don't buy us anything, we'll reach out to them to tell them, you have your money, come and buy us. How many categories do we have? We used to have like 20. What do we send them out? Anything. Okay, so we don't have any segmentation, right? Why don't we start there? It took us 10 years to create a CRM department. Yep. But we jumped too far, and we are now in the hyper-personalization campaign era. Without a CDP, we do have a data mart. I don't know what we're doing with that, but we have it. We have SAS, we have a Marcis, ExactTarget, HCL, Salesforce. We have everything that out there in the market. We don't have a CDP yet. I really don't want one. I wouldn't buy one. But the thing is, these questions that you ask, they're not sexy questions. You have to spend a lot of time of thinking and planning and getting to the right answers and creating small campaigns of big cohorts to see if that changes and moves the needle. But we are discussing on, look, I sent 255,000 emails to a base of 15 million customers, and we had an increase of 0.000007% increase of sales. That doesn't move the needle. So if we don't spend time making these questions and answering them and getting the right cohorts and making the big questions, there's no technology that's going to solve it. There's no technology out there. You got to spend time thinking, designing, and testing broadly, and then go deeper, and then go narrower.
It brings me to an interesting thing I was just thinking about. So, with CX being a hot topic, customer experience, and commerce, I mentioned this earlier, the lifestyle of commerce, right? It's a transformative thing because it has to think about the entire customer journey. But still, we still sort of live in the world of a commerce platform or a commerce silo. Do you believe that customer experience, which everyone talks about, do you believe that in the world of commerce, the lines will really drift further into the stages I mentioned earlier, attract, educate, nurture, and come together more cohesively? Or do you think things will still stay a bit siloed in organizations? Go ahead.
I'm very biased on this question. It just gets me in a lot of trouble. So
That's why I asked.
that's why you asked? Look, at the end of the day, none of this matters. Whether you bought marketing software, sales software, service software, if no one bought anything, who cares? Right? At the end of the day, like, that's why commerce is the heart of all this. And that's why you probably have anywhere from 10 to like 50 different systems that support end-to-end commerce. Like we have 20 steps to perfect order from the beginning of the order to being able to return something. And that usually touches like 17 different systems. Right? And so, like, why do you exist? You exist to sell stuff or for someone to click on an ad. That's it. Right? If that doesn't happen, then all this other stuff is a waste of time. So if you really think about like where you optimize in your systems, you optimize for commerce and everything will come along. Oh, well, wait, we have too many issues or errors. Okay, and then we'll put the customer service stuff in. Oh, wait, we're not generating the marketing campaigns we needed because now, okay, fine, we'll add the marketing campaigns. But you start with commerce and work your way out is basically how we've always designed for CX. Otherwise, what the heck are you doing? Oh, beautiful marketing campaign. Oh, we have nothing to sell. Okay, great, who cares, right? So we didn't sell enough, so that's why no one's calling us up for support. Oh, okay, great. So it always starts with commerce.
Honestly, I don't want to be recognized for the best customer service company, for the best marketing ad campaign. I want to be recognized for the most profitable company that makes a lot of business. And then great customer success and great customer experience. And a lot of great histories will come after that. But you got to think first, how do you enable your customer never to reach out to your customer service? And how do you really create simple things? And about this Cupertino company you were speaking about, I remember that, it's a different one, I believe. The CEO said, the hard things of making simple things. So if you spend time really making simple things for your customer, then your business will follow. So the more time you spend doing really simple things for your customers, sales will follow. And then forget about all the technology you have to bring in and all the CX experts. Yes, you have to have experts, of course. This is a talent-based business. It's not about technology. It's about people and technology and processes. But honestly, you have to spend time creating for the customer a great journey in which they can be self-served. And if they want to be served through the phone, make them easy for them. Through a bot, let them decide where to be served.
Yeah. Choice is important.
It's interesting listening to the responses. Having been a competitor on the product side of HCL for a while, we talked about that all the time. You know, what's our core competency? Should we, encourage our clients to optimize for commerce? How much do we build the product out to include all these other areas so that we can help destroy silos? But I agree, ultimately, if you let the customer guide your decisions, and I'm biased in this way of thinking, sometimes point solutions are the right solution. Sometimes a person is the right solution. Sometimes not a silo is the right solution, but to democratize that way of thinking so that it isn't so you're not thinking about silos and technologies. You're thinking about kind of silos and how to get the customer to where they need to go. So it's I don't think, as long as you're working with your platform, it's extensible and you have that architecture in mind, it really is limitless in that way. You're building to what the customer needs.
Yeah,
right?
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Ray, you hit on something earlier. It comes down to the people. So along those lines, we heard from Boots, right? They talked about how they launched their new site, but they did this entire awareness campaign around their mobile platform and the reimagination of that. And I'm wondering, we talk about people, agility within organizations to be able to accomplish and achieve these results. Because at the end of the day, we all have staffs. And also, at last I checked, there's somewhat of a talent shortage that we're all dealing with, for sure. So I'm curious, how do you create agility within your teams? I used earlier the notion of creative democracy was my kind of standard of saying that's how we're going to establish our culture. How do you see firms trying to establish the right culture to drive agility, to do some of the things like what Boots and what Jennifer talked about, what they did there?
I don't know about the rest of you. I'd love to talk to each and every one of you about this, but I still see a lot of organizations struggle with this. So they're talking about agility, and they're thinking more literally, like we need Scrum training. We need to understand how to move from waterfall to these different agile processes, and failing like spectacularly. And I do think it comes down to it's cultural. Yeah. It has to come from the leadership down. You do have to invest in training. It might not be a Scrum methodology specifically, but like expand the notion of what does Agile mean? It goes back to, in my mind, do what's best for the customer. And then you can start building processes and training programs around that. And then other methodologies can be applied. But I think, especially what we've learned post-COVID, is that people are smart. They want to do the right thing. If you give them the tools and some guidance on how to do it, they'll execute for you. So a little less rigidity, I think, in the world of agility is going to be really important going forward. And that's where we've seen the most success, is really relying on the people part a lot more.
What you hire for is really important. 90% of your workforce is going to be really good at doing things the way you tell them to, right? These are the rules, this is what you need to do. And so they get better at faster, better, cheaper. They get better at optimizing things. They help you find the efficiency. Out of that 90%, 8% of your overall workforce is really good at optimization and creating like incremental growth and incremental innovation, right? And so they'll take something that you do and get a 20 to 30% gain out of it. There's that 3% of like people that just don't fit in that spectrum, and they're the folks that think outside of the box. They're the innovators that are going out to figure that out. So it's just really important when you hire is that you understand like what you're hiring for, because depending on where you are in that innovation spectrum, you need to readjust those percentages. And in order to do that, one of the things that you can do is free up your capacity, because we are short on people. And this is where a lot of automation, software, services, they all come into play. So how many remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There's the one with the...
Paying attention to my presentation, you know what I was saying.
You would have known. And on the bottom, like they didn't include internet, but that's fine, right? So, but there's their basic needs like food, shelter, and then the high end is like, your ego and whatever. Well, we have a corporate version of that as well. And the bottom is regulatory compliance. Don't get me killed, don't get me sued, don't get me fired, right? And we spend most of our time doing that. Right? Whether it's GDPR, whether it's the way we look at RevRec, it's whether we think about how we deal with privacy, it's just there, right? And there's a lot of regulation in every industry that we're working on. And then if we have time, we focus on operational efficiency. That's the next level up. For every dollar invest, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 back, and people are usually okay with spending plans for something like that. But when we get to revenue growth, for every dollar invest, maybe I'll make you 3 or 4, like we don't have as much time for that. And it gets even worse when we start talking about transformation, because strategic differentiation is the next tip, and then there's brand, right? If your company was a person, what would they be like, right? So that's kind of the pyramid that we have today. Until you flip that pyramid, you have no capacity. That's really the challenge. You want to be able to flip that pyramid where your top people are focused on mission and brand and purpose, like what are we going to do? The next group is focused on business models, and then you work your way down. That team is focused on monetization and growth. But the only way you can do that is if you can automate operational efficiency and regulatory compliance, right? And that's where software, that's where AI, automation, that's where we want to put our focus there. So now you have your best people thinking about what do we do next? How do we build? As opposed to how do we keep this crap running? Right? Which is the worst part you want to be in. And that's where these allocations of people are, because the more automation you have, the more you can shift your team from that 90% focusing on just keeping the lights on to like 70% and freeing up people to do incremental innovation and thinking about new types of projects. And that's the people aspect that makes it very hard. We're not optimized for that kind of strategy.
I would add, start small. Don't try to become agile the whole organization. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, so start small. You really have to break the silos and bring a team together with a very clear and single business outcome that they have to aim for. If you're planning to achieve many things at the same time, human beings, we're trying to do a lot of things at the same time, especially under this new era. We're trying to be multitasking. At the business level, we have to choose one single business objective that we have to be pointing at. Do a lot of scenario planning. A lot of things are gonna get out of your plan. A lot of things are gonna happen in between your planning. So be realistic that things are not going the way you were expecting. And focus, 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 and focus. And make sure you have the right leader leading that specific team. It's about leadership, focus, having one single outcome, and eventually things will follow. And if you fail, great, celebrate it. If you don't fail, celebrate it. If you don't achieve it, celebrate it, but try again and try again and try again. But focus with a business outcome. It's not about getting the Agile Award of the Year. It's about having incremental value every single planning you'd go for. That's it. It's not about the award or the certificate. It's about the business outcome that you're planning to do.
That makes a lot of sense. I think with the talent out in the challenges we're facing with finding people to do work and everyone, we're not sure what they want to do. I know in the States it's hard to find people when you're in IT services anymore, it seems. They all go to Google, Facebook, and everywhere else. I think showing that culture in the recruiting process is the key. I know we've worked hard. I really focused on creative democracy to build our team here. And I think that's a real premise that if you can identify your identity, put your identity out there, what kind of culture you have as a team. You said culture eats strategy for breakfast all day long. You have to have the right culture. Otherwise you can't recruit. Well, getting a little more specific, I do have one question around Google Analytics. So turns out in Europe, only 3 countries, Austria, Italy, and France, it's legal. Where are we going if that's not the alternative going forward? So I'm moving back into data for a minute. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. But what do we do as an option? Where do we go from here?
Come to Latin America. There's no GDPR. So far. Do business with us.
I like that.
Put all your email marketing campaigns out of the UK. They don't work there either. That's why you're getting spam from the UK a lot.
So that's the solution?
That's the solution. No, actually the solution is loyalty programs, right? Because what happens with loyalty programs is it's first-party data, right? So build out your loyalty program and referral networks on your loyalty program, then you won't have to rely on third parties for that data. That first-party data is actually pretty powerful. And so loyalty program on its own doesn't do anything. Loyalty program with lots of engagement and touch points is very, very important, right? The more you can make connection points for them to do something with the loyalty program, what do they spend the points on? Okay, that shows me demand. Like, what are they saving their points for? Okay, that gives me another indicator, right? What are they giving away? Who's in their network for that? How do you actually increase the size of the network? Can you add people to the loyalty program that aren't even your customers? Ooh, that's very interesting. What's new customer acquisition? My CACs are down because of the loyalty program. So those are the things that you want to start thinking about.
It is a race to first-party data, and you're exactly right, working with each of our clients and each brands on that specific set of engagement tactics to do all the things that you just talked about. But everybody has a different goal and objective, a different brand, a different vision to get there. But I would say that is probably in the top 3 outcome-driven objectives that we're working with in our brands is how to move to first-party data. I mean, there's got to be a journey it's going to take to get there, but we're working with people on how to get to that endpoint.
And go to Latin America.
Yes, of course, yes.
We're actively working both with Google and Facebook on how to get to this first-party data journey because it won't last forever, definitely. And the toughest thing about the loyalty program, we just launched our loyalty program about a year and a half ago, is what's the value for the customer for giving out that data? We're lucky enough, tomorrow we're going to speak more about Copel, but quick overview. Coppel has 3 business units. One is our Coppel stores. We have a private label card. Therefore, we own and have a lot of our customer data, even the transactional data. The second one, it's a regulated business. We own a bank. And the third one is a pension fund manager. The last 2 are regulated. So sharing data among these 3 businesses it's quite a challenge. So we're getting into this journey on the cookieless world and how to get and build this robust first-party data, because we currently are relying a lot on doing a lot of Google marketing and Facebook marketing campaigns. And it's, in addition to the CAC going really, really high, it's not gonna last forever. So the farther you move from traditional or online marketing campaigns, you move into traditional marketing channels, there's no data there. So you gotta build your first-party data approach, otherwise you're gonna be lost in space. But you gotta give value back to the customer. I mean, giving out my data, I mean, honestly, logging into this Wi-Fi, why am I supposed to give you my data? Why am I getting back free Wi-Fi? Honestly, I'd rather browse through my own device, right? So you gotta give back something. If it's not gonna be for free, then you gotta give back something to your customer.
So you mentioned third-party cookies. So the death of the cookie, that third-party cookie, that's coming. We all know it. We all have to deal with it. So I guess my last question, we've all I've had projects we've dealt with first, second, third-party data. We've used psychographic data to do segments, hyper-segmentation, all these things. We've done all this stuff for years. Do you believe with the death of the third-party cookie that first-party data, if we can get it right, is that enough to do proper personalization that will support the customer journey? Is that enough, or do you think more is needed? And that may depend. If it's retail, it might depend by industry, but what are your thoughts? That's a complicated question. Sorry for the PhD question.
It's a great question. I'd love to say that first-party data could be the end-all be-all. Right now, it's not. But I keep thinking, new technology drives new behavior, like I said earlier, and could we get there? I could envision a world where we could get there, but I think a lot of other changes and behavioral changes and the value chains would have to kind of evolve.
Yeah, mathematically, there's just not enough interactions for that first-party data to be that precise. And I think that's really the question we're indirectly asking is how much data do you need for your first-party data to be valid? Right, I think that's probably the other way to ask that question. The answer to that is actually kind of interesting because the business questions we talked about earlier that you want to answer will dictate what data you want to append onto that first-party data. And 2 things are going to happen in our lifetime, and maybe sooner than that. One is your personal data, your genomics, your digital exhaust, that may become your property right. Right? Today, you have title to your car, you have title to a house, that's a property right. You have ideas, which are IP and trademarks, right? That intellectual property is a property right. As we go from that centralization to decentralization that we're talking about from Web 2 to Web 3 and from people's preferences about how they treat their information, you're gonna need permission, right? And a value exchange mechanism for someone's data. So for example, I'm happy to give you all my health data and I'm happy to donate that to the American Red Cross or some cancer society, whatever, for my information. Like I'm happy to volunteer and donate that to you. Now, if you're a pharma company and you want to put me in a clinical trial and pay me $800 a year for the data, oh sure, fine, I'll take that too. Right? And that's the kind of give and take that we have to build. So the first party data has to have enough interactions that says, hey, I'm going to give you this information in exchange for this. Everyone go to the airport and sign up for free Wi-Fi and with a fake email address? Of course, right? Like, I'm not going to give you my real email address. Now, if I have to validate it, right, to log on and click to start the thing, yeah, okay, maybe I'll give you my real email. Right? So it's those kind of things that you have to build those mechanisms for exchange to say, you give me this, I give you a discount. You put me a referral, I'll give you this. Right? Oh, you want something from me? Okay, that's like 15 loyalty points. Right? And that kind of exchange over time is what we want to get to because that builds the interactions and the graphs that then allow you to mine that information for the insights. We don't have enough data right now, and so we have to generate it. And that's my short answer.
I think you mentioned the business you are depend on the margins. I think it depends. If you are building or you're part of a broader ecosystem, then first party, if you are able to capture that and that becomes first party data, then that's going to be great because you'll be able to cross-sell and upsell a lot of things. But if you're in a very niche market with a niche product and offering, why would you like to have my health data if you're only selling shoes and I don't have any more well,
Yeah,
any
I'm a
business.
size 8, but you're
Yeah.
trying to sell me a jacket. That
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
help me,
if you're selling
so.
shoes, I don't have any issue with my feet, so sell me traditional shoes. So I think it will depend on the business you're in. But eventually, if you're part of a broader ecosystem, then you'll need additional information. If you're not capturing that, then you're dead.
Well, this has been phenomenal. I don't know, we have time if there's anyone that has questions for us that would like to broach a couple questions. I don't know if there's a mic running around. I can't remember if I set that up. There is. Mr. Andy Campbell has one. So wide open for any questions at all. No? Oh, okay. Thank you. We have a ringer in the audience.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So part of a 130-year-old company, and we've got engineers that have built products for their living for 130 years, right? Formerly with a scientist. Talk closer. Scientific company.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, just start over. It was a little hard to
I'm
hear.
going to start at an inch from the mouth. So currently with an engineering company, it's about 130 years old, right? So formerly with some scientific companies, with engineers and scientists, we're famous for introducing complexity. You've talked about reducing the friction, right? How do I break through this culture and really help to try to foster that frictionless, environment when the complexity is almost this necessity of the business? Are there any kind of areas to maybe focus and maybe start there to build a seedling and then germinate that?
Reduce the cycle times. Let them and ask them to solve something in the shortest time available. If they used to develop in 6, 9, 12 months, tell them to deliver something in the next 3 weeks. Do something really radical so they can come creative to come up with simple solutions and forget about the complex business outcomes. Come up with something really, really simple. Otherwise, they'll get into the complex and build an overbuild over that. Yep, just simple, very short-term assignments.
Yeah, we would do it where it's something that we do internally. We're dealing with a fairly large set of products. If we want to create, and there's complexity that we have. So if we're trying to deal with innovation, what do? We actually see who would like to be part of a team that's going to take, along your lines, take something completely out of the box, unconstrained, and come up with an MVP, a design, or something that's completely fresh and new, and create 2 or 3 teams and make it a competition. Try to create a culture of excitement and energy about a new idea. It may go nowhere, but it's to show that, hey, I just broke through 3 barriers in the firm that I didn't know I had, or that I didn't really have to worry about. And I think adding time to that, you're right, saying you got 2 weeks. And then you do a huge event with it and show people what was possible. Then ultimately what happens with a culture like that is you find that you end up with multiple teams. You end up with teams that work kind of in the core business, and you end up with teams that work in kind of the new and exciting stuff. And then oftentimes what you hope for is people will want to move into that exciting part of the business. That's how I've seen it done. Curious, Ray, you had the mic. I wasn't sure if you were going to.
No, go ahead. I was thinking about singing up here.
I think one of the things that we saw in COVID, and we've seen that over and over, is that it forced a lot of companies to reduce complexity to answer the market needs outside of regulatory and compliance. And now that we're sort of coming out of COVID, some companies are kind of slipping back into bad habits and adding that complexity back in, and without taking a moment to stop and say, well, wait, why do we need to reintroduce this? We did fine. We saw some efficiencies. Let's see what we can learn from that. So I don't know if there's anything that, any organization is unique, but were there areas you found efficiencies that you could point to and say, this is the model, that we should be looking at going forward?
I was really thinking hard through the statement how you guys make complexity part of the business, right? Because of the way you're designed. It's actually a cultural issue, which is different. It sounds to me like, that's a value, right? We're so smart. We've built something that no one else can beat. We've got something that's a massive differentiator. And I think it's just a value set adjustment, back to his point. Can you flip that around and say, hey, simplicity is complex, back to some of the earlier points, and how do we actually flip that around and saying, simplifying it could be the hardest thing you ever did, right? That's the flip that has to happen internally, and if you can culturally, project that, like, oh, you made it that simple? Wow, how'd you do that? That's pretty hard. That's what you want to get them to start staying, and if you can flip that culturally, you should be okay.
What I would also add is maybe take your specialists to a danger zone in things that are completely opposite on their areas of expertise. So they can really start to struggle on making complex things because they don't have the expertise there. So they're going to start finding creative solutions for that.
All right, that wraps up the panel. I really want to thank Bernardo, Ray, Kim. Thank you so very, very much for joining us, and thank you to you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.